Welcome back to Flight Realities. I am Joseph Kabulu, and today we're diving into a story that has captivated the world and continues to be a symbol of resilience, quick thinking, and extraordinary skill in the face of overwhelming odds. This is the true story of the miracle on the Hudson, the moment when Captain Chesley Sullenberger, with a calm hand and years of experience, safely landed a powerless Airbus A320 in the icy waters of the Hudson River, saving all 155 souls on board. But this isn't just a story about one man. It's a story about teamwork, human instincts, and how even the most impossible situations can be overcome. And today, we're going to unpack every second of that fateful event, exploring what really happened from takeoff to touchdown, and the investigations that followed. So, we'll also look at how this event changed aviation forever. So grab your seats because we're about to take off into one of the most incredible aviation stories of all time. So yeah, just to let you know, I know we've seen these stories in a lot of channels, in a lot of platforms, but today we just want to reflect on that. So just stick around and don't go anywhere. Thank you. So on January 15th, 2009, US Airways Flight 1549 was scheduled as a routine trip from LaGuardia Airport in New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina. The aircraft, an Airbus A320, was perfectly serviceable. The weather was clear, and everything seemed normal. On board were 150 passengers, including some families, business travelers, and a few people who had flown many times before. Along with them were 5 crew members, including Captain Chesley Sullenberger, and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles. Sullenberger was an experienced pilot with over 19,000 flight hours. He had served in the Air Force, flown gliders, and trained in dealing with emergency situations. You could say he was the right man in the right place for what was about to unfold at least. But First Officer Skiles was relatively new to the Airbus A320, but had years of flying experience. Wow. So they were a capable team, I would say, and together they prepared for what they expected to be a routine flight. So the flight took off from LaGuardia at exactly 3:26 p.m. as the engines roared to life. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The plane smoothly ascended into the sky, banking westward towards its initial cruising altitude. So from the perspective of passengers, it was just another flight, right? The view out of the windows was the New York skyline with Manhattan's tall buildings, the Statue of Liberty, and the bridges below. But within minutes, this tranquil scene was shattered. At approximately 3:27 p.m., just 3 minutes into the flight, and at an altitude of around 3,000 feet, the aircraft encountered a flock of Canadian geese. It's not uncommon for planes to encounter birds, and modern aircraft are designed to withstand bird strikes, but this time, something catastrophic happened. Both engines sucked in multiple birds at once, causing severe damage. So in an instant, the plane went from a fully functioning commercial jet to a powerless glider. The flight crew knew something was terribly wrong immediately. So in the cockpit, warning alarms blared and both engines rapidly lost power. So the passengers would have heard the engines sputter and go silent. But this moment, when the sound of thrust disappears and the realization sets in, must have been terrifying to them. So the plane now stripped of engine power and was dropping out of the sky. Imagine yourself in Sully's position at that moment. So you are 3 minutes into a flight, soaring over one of the most populated cities in the world, and your engines have failed. You have seconds, not minutes, to make critical decisions. The aircraft's speed was dropping, the altitude decreasing, and there were no nearby open areas to land. The situation was there, and the options were limited. Captain Sullenberger quickly took controls. First Officer Scarls began following emergency procedures, attempting to restart the engines. They went through the checklist, but nothing worked. The engines were completely disabled. This left Sully with a critical decision. Where could he safely land his plane? LaGuardia Airport was behind them, but it was too far. So, attempting to turn back would likely result in stalling the aircraft over densely populated Manhattan. Air traffic control suggested diverting to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, but Sully knew they couldn't reach it. Now, here's the remarkable part. In the chaos of the situation, Sully made a decision that few pilots would have even considered. He knew they couldn't make it through any airport, so he opted for what was, in essence, the least worst option: a water landing in the Hudson River. It was risky water landings or ditching. These are extremely dangerous and often deadly, but Sully had no other choice. He famously radioed air traffic control with a calm message: "We're going into the Hudson." In the cabin, the tension must have been unbearable. The passengers were instructed to brace for impact, and you can imagine the fear in those final moments as the plane descended over the river. So some passengers later described seeing the buildings of New York City flash by the windows as they approached the water. In the cockpit, Sully and Scarls worked to keep the aircraft stable, carefully controlling its descent to avoid stalling. They needed to hit the water at the right angle. A nose first impact or a wing dip would likely tear the plane apart. Then at 3:31 p.m., just 5 minutes after takeoff, Flight 1549 hit the surface of the Hudson River. The impact was hard, but Sully had managed to land the plane intact. The aircraft skid across the water, sending up huge sprays of foam. But miraculously, it didn't break apart. The flight attendants began evacuating the passengers immediately. The cabin was taking on water, especially toward the rear and the freezing cold. This was another deadly factor. The passengers climbed out onto the wings, which were now floating just above the icy waters of the Hudson. Others deployed the emergency slides, which doubled as rafts, but the clock was ticking. So the water was rising fast and the plane was sinking. In the freezing January weather, hypothermia was a real threat, and the passengers were desperately clinging for life. However, the miracle didn't end with the water landing. Just 4 minutes after the plane touched down, the first rescue boats arrived. New York waterway ferries, along with police and fire department boats, rushed to the scene. It was a remarkable example of coordination and quick action. The ferries pulled alongside the plane, rescuing passengers from the wings and rafts. Some rescuers jumped into the water themselves to help pull people to safety. So in the chaos of it all, it's amazing to note that not a single life was lost. And by 3:55 p.m., less than 30 minutes after the engines failed, every person on board was rescued. The plane continued to sink, but the passengers and crew were safe. So it was an extraordinary outcome, and the media quickly dubbed it the miracle on the Hudson. So in the days and weeks that followed, Captain Sullenberger was hailed as a hero. His calm under pressure, quick decision-making, and mastery of the aircraft were credited with saving 155 lives. But Sully, ever the humble professional, repeatedly emphasized that it wasn't just him. He credited the entire crew for their actions, as well as the first responders who arrived so quickly. He also pointed out that luck played a role. Had the bird strike happened a few thousand feet higher or over Manhattan, the outcome could have been very different. Of course, an event like this triggers a full investigation. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched an inquiry to determine exactly what had happened and why they looked at the bird strike. The engine failure and Sully's decision to land in the Hudson. There were critics who initially suggested that Sully could have made it back to LaGuardia or Teterboro. Flight simulators were used to test this theory, and at first it seemed plausible. But here is where the human factor comes into play. The simulators didn't account for the time it took for Sully and Scouse to assess the situation, attempt to restart the engines, and communicate with air traffic control. But once this critical human decision-making time was added, the simulations showed that Sully's decision to land in the Hudson was in fact the best and only viable option. He had made the right call under immense pressure. So the NTSB eventually cleared Sully and praised his actions, stating that his experience and judgment had undoubtedly saved lives. The investigation also led to changes in how pilots are trained to deal with bird strikes and engine failures, and how it highlighted the importance of quick thinking and teamwork in crisis situations. What makes this story even more remarkable is how it resonated with people around the world. It wasn't just about a plane crash. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of human instincts. So people were inspired by the way everyone involved, from the pilots to the flight attendants to the rescuers, worked together to survive. Had it been they were not highly coordinated, this would have resulted in something disastrous. So it's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for a miracle. So the legacy of the miracle on the Hudson continues to influence aviation today, and that is why we've chosen it as our story for today. Last week, we dealt on a story on the emergence of the Embraer E2. So you might want to check out that video. Thank you. And please don't forget to subscribe. If this video has added value or knowledge to you, you can subscribe to this channel. And then don't forget to click on the notification bell just in case you don't want to be missing any of our videos. And doing this will help you to be the first to at least know when we post content like this. Thank you. So back to the story. You can see that safety protocols have been refined, pilot training has been updated, and the event is studied in detail by aviation experts. And of course, Captain Sullenberger has become a symbol of professionalism and heroism in the field of aviation. While we do this, we believe that his story was even turned into a major Hollywood film, Sully, starring Tom Hanks. I would like to watch that film. You too, you can get that film on Netflix. Thank you. But beyond the technical analysis, beyond the Hollywood dramatization, the real lesson of the miracle on the Hudson is a deeply human one. It's about staying calm in the face of chaos, trusting your training, and working together when everything seems to be falling apart. So there's something almost poetic about the way this event unfolded, and I don't know if any of you guys have noticed this. A fully loaded jetliner, crippled by something as small as a flock of birds, yet saved by the extraordinary actions of ordinary people. Isn't that amazing? So when we talk about aviation, we often focus on the technology, the planes, the engines, the computers. And while those things are, of course, incredibly important, the miracle on the Hudson reminds us that at the heart of every flight is the pilots, the flight attendants, the air traffic controllers, and even the passengers, all playing their part in making sure a flight reaches its destination safely. So in this case, the destination wasn't a runway, but a river, and yet it was still a success. So you can see that. And of course, as Captain Sullenberger himself has said, this wasn't just a miracle. It was the result of decades of training, preparation, and teamwork. So from his early days as a fighter pilot to his years of commercial flying, every bit of Sully's experience came into play that day. And I think this also worked well for other team members like the rescuers, the ATC, the passengers, and so on and so forth. And that's something I think is worth reflecting on, and that is why we brought in the video for you today. So we can see that pilots spend years, decades, even preparing for emergencies they hope will never happen. And when they do happen, it's their training and experience that can make all the difference. So the miracle on the Hudson also underscores the importance of teamwork in aviation. So while Sully is often the face of the event, it was a team effort. And First Officer Scouse played a crucial role in managing the emergency, working with Sully in those crucial moments to try and restart the engines. But the flight attendants were quick to spring into action, helping passengers brace for impact and guiding them during the evacuation. The passengers themselves remained remarkably calm, which played a huge part in the successful evacuation. And then there were the first responders, the ferry operators, the police, and the emergency workers who arrived on the scene in record time, pulling people to safety from the freezing water. So it's often said that aviation is one of the safest ways to travel, isn't it? And incidents like this remind us why. So it's not just the technology that keeps us safe, it's the people, the training, and preparation that every pilot and crew member goes through. Is designed for moments like this. Moments where every second counts and the stakes couldn't be higher. And this is why events like the miracle on the Hudson resonate so deeply with people. So it's not just a story of survival, it's a story of human capability, of what we are able to achieve when we come together under pressure. Now you might be wondering how this event has shaped aviation in the years since. Well, there have been several key changes. First, there has been an increased focus on training pilots for best strikes and engine out scenarios, particularly at low altitudes. Sully's actions are now studied in flight schools around the world as an example of how to handle emergency with grace and precision. Second, the incident has led to improved procedures for water landings. While these scenarios are still incredibly rare, pilots now receive more detailed training on how to ditch an aircraft in water if necessary. And there's also been a renewed emphasis on bird strike prevention. Airports around the world have implemented more advanced systems for detecting and deterring birds from runways and flight paths. So while it's impossible to eliminate the risk entirely, these measures have certainly helped reduce the chances of another incident like Flight 1549. But perhaps the most lasting impact of the miracle on the Hudson is its effect on public perception of aviation. So for many people, this event served as a reminder of just how safe flying really is. But even in the face of unexpected emergency, it showed that even when things go wrong, there are systems in place and highly trained individuals who are capable of responding in ways that can save lives. So as we begin to wrap up this discussion, I want to bring the focus back to the heart of the story, the people. The passengers of Flight 1549 each had their own unique experience that day, and many have spoken publicly about how the event changed their lives. Some have described it as a wake-up call, a moment that made them appreciate life in a new way. Others have formed lifelong bonds with their fellow passengers, connected by the shared trauma of surviving what could have been a deadly disaster. Captain Sullenberger has often spoken about how the event impacted him personally. While he was lauded as a hero, he has been very open about the weight of that responsibility and the emotional toll it took on him in the years that followed. Imagine being thrust into the global spotlight overnight, with everyone calling you a hero for something you did in a moment of crisis. So for Sully, it wasn't about being a hero, it was about doing his job. And yet the humility with which he carried that title speaks volumes about his character. Sully went on to become an advocate for aviation safety, speaking at conferences, testifying before Congress, and working to improve pilot training and emergency preparedness. His message has always been clear. This wasn't a miracle, but the result of years of preparation, experience, and teamwork. So it's a message that resonates not just with those in aviation, but with people in all walks of life. But because at the end of the day, the miracle on the Hudson is a story about how ordinary people can do extraordinary things when the situation demands it. So as we close this chapter on Flight 1549, I want to leave you with a final thought. The next time you step into a plane, whether it's for a short domestic flight or a long international journey, remember the people who make that flight possible. From the pilots in the cockpit, to the flight attendants in the cabin, to the air traffic controllers guiding the plane from the ground. Every one of them plays a role in ensuring your safety. And while we hope we'll never need to see another miracle like the one on the Hudson, it's comforting to know that when the unexpected happens, there are people like Captain Sullenberger who are ready to step up. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the miracle on the Hudson, make sure to subscribe to Flight Realities for more incredible stories from the world of aviation. We cover everything from unsolved mysteries to groundbreaking innovations, so you won't want to miss what's coming next. And if you have any thoughts or questions about today's story, drop them in the chat. We'll be answering some of your questions live in just a moment. Thank you for joining me. I am Joseph Kablu here on Flight Realities. And remember, aviation is more than just flying. It's about the people, the stories, and the experiences that make it all possible. See you next time. Goodbye.
Let's get to the windows, and it was just coming down in a controlled descent.
Their eyewitness accounts are making national news.
My boss yelled, you know, there's a plane going down, and so ran to the window, and we saw it descending.
Good Morning America host Robin Roberts was another eyewitness from the balcony of her West Side apartment.
He just slowly continued down the river, and it was almost like he used the Hudson River as his runway.